Welcome, everyone. As people are trickling in, I'd like to say hello to you all. Thank you so much for being here today. You're here to see how decentralized identity drives data privacy. Data privacy is a topic near and dear to my heart, so I myself am super excited about this one. This series is presented in partnership between Metropolitan New York Library Council, Internet Archive, DWeb, and Library Futures. My name is Davis Aaron Anderson. I am Director of Programs and Partnerships at Metropolitan New York Library Council, aka Metro for short. You can find us on Twitter at MNYLC, which is a little initialism of our name there. While you're trickling in, if you would not mind giving us a sense of community here today, let us know in chat what your name is, where you're dialing in from, where you work, anything that you'd like to share today. I'd especially love to know what brings you to our presentation today, what drives you to this topic. Metro's events are all governed by our code of conduct. So my colleague Mary Bacchia will be dropping that link into chat so you can see what we're all about. Mostly we just ask that everyone's civil to one another in chat and Q&A towards our presenters. As we go, please do chime into chat. We want to know any questions that you might have. Our presenters here are experts, so this is a great time to ask any questions you might have. Wendy Hanamura, who I will be introducing in just a moment, will be looking through chat as we go to pull out questions to ask our presenters, and our presenters are also ready to answer questions directly, so feel free to have at that chat. If you registered by 10 a.m. Eastern time yesterday, you were in receipt of our lovely, wonderful resource guide. Mary will also drop a link to that in chat, as well as the first two guides that we wrote for the series. We're on session 3, so now we've got 3 guides and 3 to go. If you did not receive it, please stay tuned to your email inbox. That'll be sent to you tomorrow along with a survey. We love to hear your feedback, so please take a look for that. And share it far and wide. This is an open document, so please feel free to pass it on to whoever might be interested. And finally, I'd like to welcome and introduce Wendy Hanamura, who is one of our partners for this initiative. Wendy is Director of Partnerships at Internet Archive. In 2016, she planned the very first Decentralized Web Summit, and over the last 6 years has helped to guide the global growth of the decentralized web. She's here to help produce and actually is taking the lead on this 6-part series, Imagining a Better Online World, Exploring the Decentralized Web. So over to you, Wendy. Thanks so much for being here, and I'm looking forward to this one.
Thank you, Davis, and welcome everybody. It is wonderful to see you and meet you and to welcome you to this session called Keeping Your Personal Data Personal, How Decentralized Identity Drives Privacy. And it's something we can all relate to because in our everyday lives, we use our identity to log on to different services tens of times a day. I want to share with you the game plan for the next 60 minutes. First, I'm going to start by giving you just a little of an introduction and an overview of some of the challenges and the promise of self-sovereign identity. Then we're going to introduce you to Kaliya Young, a true expert, one of the founders of this whole movement. And she's going to really give you a bird's eye view of what self-sovereign identity means, how it works, where they are in the technology roadmap. And then I'm very excited because we always try to bring you hands-on demos. And today's demos are by a librarian and a scholar working with a startup technologist. And they're going to show you how self-sovereign identity is being applied or could be applied to academic conferences. So we hope you'll stay for the hour and beyond. And the goal is that by the end of this session, you'll have a working knowledge of self-sovereign identity. But first, I want to remind us about this document. If you think of the web as a stack of technologies, we believe that you can decentralize almost every part of that stack, including right there in the center, the identity layer. That's what we're going to be talking about today. How do you decentralize the way identity works when you're working on the web? I want to start, though, with a question. Okay, so go into chat, and I want you to put a number that you think of accounts and passwords that you use. How many accounts and passwords do you think that you have? Okay. If you're like me, you probably have no clue. So last night I went into my password holder and I counted, and I personally, just in my password holder, have 251 accounts and passwords. 251. I looked online, and a company in this area says that research shows that in 2017, the average American citizen had about 150 accounts and passwords. But they believe that that number has skyrocketed because we've been online so much during the pandemic. For the sake of convenience, what do we do? When I have 251 accounts, well, that means sometimes I resort to using Facebook or Google or LinkedIn identities because it's easier. But here's the rub, right? There is no guarantee that Facebook, Google, and LinkedIn have my best interests at heart. Do they? I know that they're delighted to know where I'm logging on, to use that personal data of where I go. There's no guarantee really that any of those big companies and platforms won't get hacked and that my identity would be stolen. But I am making a choice to trade privacy and security for convenience. Honestly, I think it's getting worse. Okay, earlier this month, I went to South by Southwest. It was my first big post-pandemic conference. But here's the rub. To get into any of the events, they made me first go to Clear. That's right. I had to download this app. And then once I was on Clear, they made me upload my photo. They made me upload my vaccine card, front and back. They made me upload my driver's license and then input where I had gotten my vaccines and what the date was. And then they bundled it all up into this QR code, which I had to show every time I wanted to enter a venue. Now, I've blocked the QR code because here's the problem, right? QR codes can be copied and reverse engineered so that you could get at my data. It's a little creepy, but that's what I had to do in order to attend a conference. Well, maybe there is something better. That's right, something that people have called self-sovereign identity, or SSI. And in self-sovereign identity, individuals or entities are in full control of their digital identity. It allows us to control what credentials are uploaded and when we share those credentials and how those credentials are used. Now, this has been in the works for about 20 years, and during its evolution, movement leaders identified these top 10 principles that include portability and interoperability, because you want to be able to take your data and move it from platform to platform. And persistence, you want to make sure that your identity is going to be there. Also protection, because what happens if these platforms are hacked? And therein lies the biggest challenge, if you ask me, of self-sovereign identity, because we do have control, but that means we also have to manage our encryption keys or whatever it is, the passwords that we use. We are in control of those. If we lose those, there's no big third-party entity that I can turn to and rely on to help me. It raises lots of interesting technical challenges around verification and also management. But now I would like to bring on somebody who really knows the subject inside and out. Please meet Kaliya Young. She's better known as Identity Woman. She's the author of 2 books about decentralized identity, and she's the co-founder of the Internet Identity Workshop, which is coming up again in April. She's here to give you a bird's eye view of a field she helped to found. Welcome, Kaliya.
Thank you so much, Wendy. It's great to be here with all of you. I'm a big fan of libraries. They're a key piece of infrastructure, both that we need. So I wanted to invite us all first to take a breath in and a breath out and feel your own body. Sit with that for a moment. And now feel all the communities and organizations that you play a role in leading and stewarding. Connect to the bigger circles of geography that you're on, where your feet are landing, the bioregion that you are connected to on that land. And finally, the planet as a whole. So my inspiration and starting point for this work in the field of digital identity arose from a network that was considering how global ecology and information technology came together, and that's Planet Work. And they convened their first conference in the year 2000, focused on global ecology and information technology. And then following that conference, a core group of people gathered over 2 years and considered what would be key pieces of infrastructure that this network could activate and co-create to support this new internet thing at the time that was spreading, to consider what was needed to support it serving people, organizations, and the planet. And they wrote this paper, The Augmented Social Network, Building Identity and Trust into the Next Generation Internet. And I'm going to quote a small piece of it right now. So underlying this report is the assumption that every individual ought to have the right to control his or her own online identity. You should be able to decide what information about yourself is collected as part of your digital profile, and of that information, who has access to different aspects of it. Certainly, you should be able to read the complete contents of your own digital profile at any time. An online identity should be maintained as a capability that gives users many forms of control. Without flexible access and control, trust in systems of federated network identity will be minimal. A digital profile that is not treated by the corporations who host them as a formal extension of the person it represents. But if this crucial data about you is not owned by you, what right do you have to manage its use? A civil society approach to persistent identity is the cornerstone of the Augmented Social Network project. So the challenge, it turns out, to making this vision real has been an almost 20-year journey at this point. And the great news is that we finally have some technology Lego bricks that I'm hoping many of you and your institutions can pick up and build with. And we can co-create this new emerging layer of tools and technology to support individuals owning and controlling their digital representations of themselves and their data. I want to say that decentralized identity is not new. How many of you have some sort of physical wallet that you put in your pocket or your purse when you leave the house? I'd love to see sort of plus ones, or I don't know what kind of sharing you can do with each other in chat, but like, I imagine it's a pretty significant number. And then I'd love you to think about, and you could even open up your wallet if you wanted, and how many different cards do you have in that wallet? And if you could type some numbers in chat, that would be great. It's way too many, says someone. 8, yeah. And these cards that you have in your wallet are all coming from different places, right? There isn't one source. There's lots of different sources. So part of what we're trying to do with this technical work is to replicate that kind of architecture where you're in control of what you share and how. I'd love if some of you would be willing to share some of the sources or types of sources of those cards. I imagine many of them are library cards, but what else? What other types of cards do you find in your wallet? I want you to think about when you share these cards, you simply take the card out of your wallet and you present it to whoever you're sharing it with, and then you put it back into your wallet. These physical paper cards do not phone home to the issuer. They don't tell the Department of Motor Vehicles when you presented your card to get into a bar. They don't tell the if you're a member of AARP and you use it as a discount code, they don't tell the AARP you just checked into a hotel. These physical cards are autonomous data packages under your control. And so the question we've had is, how do we make this type of controlled sharing possible digitally? The models that we had 10 years ago for digital identity tightly coupled identifiers, like strings of numbers, the address for your membership, and the attributes associated with it, and required a digital ping back to whoever the source was to get the information. And my community has worked really hard to rewire this architecture. So we had systems, and we still have these systems of global centralized registries that help us communicate. So we have ICANN that manages domain names, IANA manages IP addresses, the ITUT manages the global network of telephone numbers and its registries. And you also have private namespaces that you also have identifiers in. So you have Gmail accounts, LinkedIn accounts, Twitter accounts, Facebook accounts, and examples of email providers like Yahoo. And these are all identifiers that are controlled by the corporations that issue them. They have the ultimate right to revoke those identifiers and thus erase your digital self that you built up on their platform or using their service. And they also do a really poor job of communicating anything meaningful about you, attributes that might be relevant to some other transaction that you're doing. So what if we figured out a way to digitize cards or signed portable proofs like you and share them digitally? And these proofs would come from all kinds of sources. They would be decentralized in the sense that there would be literally of hundreds of millions of issuers. So a credential is any set of claims issued to an entity by another entity. And we want to get these into a digital form. And so that in our language that we've worked on to build this, we call this signed portable digital proof a verifiable credential. And it has credential metadata. It has the claims about an individual, organization, or thing. And it has this digital cryptographic signatures to seal it all up together in a package. And what happens is that an issuer creates a verifiable credential for an individual, and it sends it to their digital wallet. And then once it's in the individual's digital wallet, the individual has the power of where to share the signed digital proof. And they do so using another format called a verifiable presentation that has the presentation metadata, the proof of the holding of a verifiable credential, and the signed cryptography. So that side of the transaction looks like this. So this is equivalent to when you're taking their cards out of your physical wallet and sharing it with whoever you're presenting it to. I think it's really important to understand something, that when you're using verifiable presentations in digital form, you're sharing a proof that you hold the verifiable credential. You're not actually sharing the same thing. If you were, you would be risking that this, in your sharing, you could be attacked by having that be replayed. So that's one thing to understand. I want to introduce another Lego brick in this plethora of new tools that we have. It's called a decentralized identifier. And it's a really, really long number that's generated by software under individuals' control and under issuers' control. And it's an alternative to, remember, those centralized identifiers we talked about earlier. And so this is one of those key building blocks. And each decentralized identifier comes with a DID document that has these components. And you can see in here, it has key material, authentication protocols, and an endpoint. And this is not a presentation about cryptography, and I would recommend actually, for those of you interested, going and learning about some of the super simple basics of cryptography, because much of the Web3 stack that Wendy highlighted at the beginning leverages cryptography in new and creative ways. But you've got a did and a did document. And these are key underpinnings to how this system of decentralized issues and verifiers can actually coordinate and find each other. So when the issuer creates a verifiable credential, they also anchor a did and a did document that contains the public key material that is necessary for the verifier to check the veracity of the verifiable presentation that they're receiving. So it's this external reference that helps them figure out whether the presentation they're receiving from the individual is real. And that's just on a cryptographic level. There's another challenge that also needs to be solved to get these systems to work, and that is the issuer really a higher educational institution or a library or whatever? And so what also needs to be created to help this decentralization work is that entities that are trusted stand up registries or lists of the decentralized identifiers associated with their members. And I articulate, just so we can anchor this, so with some hypothetical future decentralized registry curators could be in common, which manages the Higher Education Federation in the United States, or even the American Library Association, making a list of all the libraries that belong to them and the associated decentralized identifiers. And then you can have this system of decentralized exchange work, because there's a way to go look up the meaning or the actual institutional belonging of these decentralized identifiers. And this is, I wanted to walk through this last slide to kind of summarize all the pieces that we talked about today. So we have, on the one hand, we have an issuer. The issuer shares a verifiable credential with the holder, the individual. The holder can move move the verifiable credential between wallets that they might control, and they can present the verifiable credential using the verifiable presentation format to multiple verifiers. When the verifier receives it, they check the status in a registry of like, is this really a library? Is this really the decentralized identifier of a higher education that someone's presenting their degree from? And they also use that to look up the key material and check that the verifiable presentation proving the holding of the credential is not been tampered with. There's other pieces, which is the issuer could revoke the credential and sort of say it's no longer valid. And the holder could also delete a credential out of their wallet. So this is a kind of overall life cycle of this digital sign-proof verifiable credential that helps us create a digital replication of kind of the qualities that the paper wallets, the paper credentials or plastic credentials in our physical wallets have. And then I just wanted to close with this to sort of frame the overall work that we've been doing for almost 20 years within the Internet Identity Workshop, is that we're really working to innovate the protocols to represent people in the digital realm in ways that empower them and that they are in control of. And so with that, I'd like to share this slide with you about how you can find me if you want to connect more, and turn the microphone back over to Wendy.
Kaliya, I'm going to ask you to stay with me and let's answer questions. So a lot of questions coming in. One is that humans don't care about technology.
Mhm.
I would say that's true. They care about what they need to do, get a wallet, and who provides support when that isn't working or it's stolen. So in the systems that you see active today, let's say I had my identity wallet and I messed up my encryption keys. What are my options?
There's a lot of work going on in this realm, and it's something that the entire Web3 community is really grappling with. There are folks looking at custodial services, so not requiring everybody to 100% control their own keys on their one mobile phone is really important. If we think about how money systems work today, we don't insist that everybody hold cash under their mattress at home. We have institutions called banks we created to support us managing money. I think we could see either the existing institutions that have fiduciary duties with people stepping up and playing a similar role in this new sort of digital identity and data management space. And there's also just like making sure that that digital wallets have easy ways to back them up and are encouraging people to do so. So there's no like one magic answer to this challenge. You could potentially even see libraries being a trusted institution in this role. There are solutions that involve like taking a long cryptographic recovery key, breaking it into 5 parts and sharing them with 5 different institutions, and you need 3 of them to reconstitute it to recover it.
Right. So Milo asks, does this mean that holders can freely transfer their credentials to other holders?
Verifiable credentials were designed to never be transferred. There's different strategies around supporting that being true. One is that you embed within in the exchange process between the holder and the issuer, the holder encloses what's called a link secret that is enclosed in all of the credentials that they get from all issuers, and they can cryptographically prove they were the one who has had all these different credentials presented. But they're not designed to be transferable between people.
Shady, who comes from OpSci, which is building tools for decentralized tools for scientists, points out that identity tooling today is not really built with the user in mind, and they're usually deployed within walled gardens that don't foster interoperability. Now, I know that you've been working on pathways to interoperability for a long time, Kaliya. How would you address that?
I think our work is inspired by the open standards that preceded this layer of the internet, specifically the development of standards in the IETF, things like SMTP that give us email interoperability globally today, and standards at the W3C like HTML that give us web page interoperability globally. And so we've worked incredibly hard within the context of the W3C, the Decentralized Identity Foundation, and the Trust over IP Foundation to author open standards that are free for anybody to implement. And that is what gives me hope that we can have a truly interoperable layer that isn't controlled by one vendor or one particular tooling. And we're just getting to the point of enough deployments and enough market activity to start doing interoperability testing around conformance with the standards, and does if there's 5 different wallets and 5 issuers, can they all issue and accept each other's credentials? And that's really going to get going in earnest this summer and fall.
From where I sit, Kaliya, the identity movement has been one of the most kind of methodical and long-standing, and creating a path to interoperability by creating these DIDs, right? That basically it's a standard that you want all decentralized identity companies to adhere to so that we can have interoperability. And in our resource guides, everyone, we have a lot more information about the DID standard. Jonathan asks, are you saying that decentralized identity actually requires additional centralized resources that verify the authenticity of whatever is being claimed? If so, what exactly do you mean by decentralized identity and decentralized control?
That's an excellent question. So right now, in terms of cryptographic security on the web, there's certificate authorities, and those are entirely centralized trees of signing that sort of manage web security. You also have DNS, which has its own cryptography in it to prove its validity, also globally centralized trees. What decentralized identity does is it does not eliminate existing institutional frameworks for knowing things are true. It simply opens up the field for who can say what and what types of registries are available. So if the province of British Columbia is the authoritative source of businesses that have chosen to incorporate in its jurisdiction, and it wants to have those the verifiable credentials it issues to those businesses recognized by other provinces across Canada, they need to put their decentralized identifier in a ledger and say, hey, we're the province of British Columbia. And that province probably wants to recognize credentials issued by other provinces. And so you might have, the government of Canada make a registry of all the different provinces in their decentralized identifier that they use to sign business certificates, for example. And these frameworks for sharing the meaning and the business process conformance of these different institutions are called governance or trust frameworks. And they exist today at scale. And that's actually how our complex society runs. And part of this is not saying throw all of that out and we're going to just we're just trusting random numbers to mean what, right? So we're opening up the field so that we are not reliant on one or a few entirely centralized globalized registries for anything, but a plurality of registries for many different use cases and many different networks. We could all just collapse into just our own little identifiers. Great. And then what? We live in a complex society where institutions exist, and how those institutions communicate and share information and help anchor meaning for us and other institutions is still something we need to figure out how to do.
Kaliya, thank you so much. There are a lot more questions we didn't get to, but I'm going to ask you to actually type answers to those questions in the Q&A and in the chat. This was a great intro to a very complex system that I think very soon many of us will be using. Potentially billions of account holders will be using some form of wallet-based decentralized ID that they control. So thanks for explaining that, and we'll catch up with you later in other fora. And I want to encourage everyone to also check out the Internet Identity Workshop, which is coming up in April. It's a great unconference. Next, on to demos, and I am so excited to introduce you to Lambert Heller. Lambert Heller is going to be presenting, and he is the director of the Open Science Lab, TIB, the Leibniz Information Center for Science and Technology, which is based in Hanover. And Lambert has been in the library world from about 2004. And truly, his focus has always been to bring research data and manage it responsibly in library systems. He's also joined by Irene Adamski. She's the head of operations for one of my very favorite organizations, JOLOCOM.io. JOLOCOM is a small, ethically managed, open source, mission-driven firm that specializes in self-sovereign identity. They're creating some of the biggest solutions across Europe with partners like Deutsche Telekom and Bosch. But in this instance, you have Irene and JOLOCOM working with TIB and Lambert to do something for academic conferences. I'm going to turn it over to you, Lambert, to take it away.
Thank you so much, Wendy and Internet Archive and Metro for having me. I'm really excited about this, especially given the audience of librarians and archivists. It's great. So yeah, what we did together with JOLOCOM in the last 2 years is, so we passed successfully the very selective, highly selective European Commission's funding program named Open Ledger. And we did this with coming up with a new initiative called CONDIDI. And when you heard carefully about the wonderful presentation that Kaliya just gave, you will recognize the funny twist in the project name, CONDIDI, like a decentralized identifier. So, and what is it? So just have a look. We have a live prototype, a working prototype, still running on our library website. And what does it do? Basically, a tool that allows people running academic events of any kind. So for instance, workshops, conferences, you name it, to have a platform that helps them to conduct every step necessary to have their event. And you know from the inner perspective of academic life that these kind of events are super important, and you might have a very small, very tightly informal workshop that a few years later turns out as super inspiring and important. Yeah, so but you need to have it somehow, and this tool helps you with this. And you already guessed it. It makes use of it's all open source software. It makes use of open standards, and it's all about minimizing the amount of person-related information that you need and receive from the conference participants, right? And what's more, it helps the conference participants at some later point to prove that they really did some very, very tightly specific contribution to that conference. And this is all being done making use of CONDIDI's Smart Wallet app on your smartphone, which existed before. And you might ask now, why do you do this exactly as a library? So why do you collaborate with such a great startup to build some new open source software? And that's pretty easy. You might already guess it. So as I don't need to explain you, we are all about the freedom of information users and library users. They should be perfectly free to access and make use of media resources of any kind. And a super important aspect of this, you already guessed it, is privacy. Yeah, it's important. And when we learn that we can do better, that there are new technical approaches, it's important to make full use of it. And there's one more perspective, and I would like to expand a little bit more on this somewhat later in 2 minutes or so. And that is that SSI turns out to be not only about taking care of users' privacy, but also opening up new ways of innovation. But before I go into detail about this, I would like to give over to Irene, who will show you what JOLOCOM came up with right after CONDIDI. And they prove that you can do even more than just certifying a contribution to a conference. So it's more generalized. And Irene, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Lambert, and thank you everyone for attending today. And I'll try to keep this quick and just quickly build on what Kaliya has already introduced you. So you heard about you yourself being the identity subject, the identity holder, and you would be interacting with a smart wallet on your phone. And then we have something that I would like to refer to as a division of power and identity in the digital age. You have got the issuer, which can be, for example, a university issuing a student ID card. And that will be then on your phone where you can present it where you need it. We already know this by now from the COVID pass. So the issuer is somebody you trust and that others would trust as well, a university or a health institution, for example. And then you've got a verifier who will ask, please present the information you have so that we can verify that it's true. There was a question in the chat, for example, am I of age? And I can verify, yes, I am of age, without the verification side needing to know where I was born, when I was born, and everything else that is connected with that. So then let me show you how this looks like in a physical, basically in a done program. As Lambert has mentioned, we were involved with Condidi, where we were then able to basically build different functionality. And then we built off of Condidi in order to build a fully functioning web agent. And I just logged in with I'm logging in with my smartphone. It is asking me, do I want to allow this? This is a very huge part and will be happening later. So you heard about the issuer and the verifier. This is still a demo, so it's in the same spot. And we will pretend we are an issuer. Let's say we are the people from DWeb and Metro who are issuing a credential for participation. And here we have, for example, a DWeb attested SSI expertise, asking for you to prove that you have actually today attended the meeting about SSI and keeping your personal data personal. And if I then go to my smart wallet and try to share it, I get basically the issuer offers me a QR code to scan, and there I get issued an attestation that, hey, I've attended today's meeting. Do I want to accept a proof of this? Yes, I do. And then, ta-da, I get basically into my wallet, Kaliya mentioned it earlier, something like a card proving that I was here for the entire day. And this is basically where we started off with Condidi to say, okay, I attended, and possibly my university wants to see that I did attend this meeting. My employer might want to, or I as a student or as a presenter want to show that, hey, I've been part of this panel, I shared, I presented a demo, and this goes in. And then we want to spin this farther away from just conferencing. Then we also get into other things about verification. For example, I can also be an employer. For example, if I want to have applications for a teaching assistant position, I can ask for the usual things. What's the name? Are you enrolled in our university? And maybe I also want to support minorities and have, for example, information about the disability level. Because when I have the option, I want to give a person with disability a chance to get this position on top of everyone else. But of course, sharing disability information with somebody trusted like a university, this might be okay. But what is with sources where I am a bit worried about sharing this information? And that is the good thing about SSI. You don't have to share it if you don't want to. So I will then, if I scan the QR code with my wallet, will be asked for different documentation. My student ID to show that I'm enrolled in this university actually, but also a proof of my disability. What is the level by which institution was it recognized? Do I want to share this or do I not want to share it? Either way, I am in control of my data. And this is the final part of the demo at the moment. The good thing then here, Kaliya has already showed this. We have a verification process, so it shows that this has been happening up and down the evening, and the verification was acceptable, the proof was presented, but nobody here in the admin office of the teaching assistant's office, for example, sees if disability option was shared, what kind of level this is, just the information that the proof that wanted to be shared was handed over. And this is basically the privacy preserving option we wanted to show you, that on the verification side, so this division of power, a health department might know your disability level, but an employer doesn't need to know until basically you actually start working for them. But now I'm handing over to Lambert again.
Thanks, Irene. So I would like to continue with my next slide. We came up here in Europe a few months ago only with an initiative calling Stop Tracking Science. And this is addressing a huge elephant in the room whenever we talk about information exchange in research between researchers, research infrastructure in general. And that is that we have by now powerful, almost oligopolies of former publishers, now data analysis firms who run the platforms, where research data is managed and analyzed, where publications are shared, you name it. And their main business, and they even admit it, is by now not that you pay them for being able to read publications. Mostly it's open access by now. But what they do instead is they collect your personal data. So they track what you do. Your journal is reading you by now. Sounds awkward, and it is awkward. It cuts deeply into researchers' autonomy. They do things with your personal related data, with your usage behavior, which you do not understand and have no control about. They feed it into their recommendation algorithms. They trade it with dozens and hundreds of firms. So this is really bad, and we need to address this badly. What is a way to address this? I tell you, and you already know, and this is scholar-led infrastructure. So we need to take the responsibility on our own. So there are many things that can be done by now, very serious applications in research data management and publishing or so with open source software, which is run by other associations and so on. So Kaliya named ALA, which might run certain services addressing librarians' needs in the US. So essentially, we can say the building blocks of the solution are already there. So this is ultimately the way to stop data grabbing and to have really real openness and real shared responsibility. And have a look at TIB's website. So you even have the link to one of the pages of TIB where my team shows what can be done with open information about scholarly activities and their outcomes. This is something where so-called PIDs come in, which stands for persistent identifiers. And this diagram that I share here with you is from Marcus Sabadello, another very active guy in the self-sovereign identity community. And what he points out here is that persistent identifiers like ORCID to disambiguate author names are not that far, in fact, from DIDs, because they are also accompanies. So there is many unintended ways they can be used in a very open, shared, responsible manner. What I want to say now toward the end of our presentation is that we can make the best of this, what we already have with ORCID IDs and other persistent identifiers and self-sovereign identity. We can combine them. We can combine their strengths. And this is not trivial. This is not what I want to tell you, but it's a challenge we work on. And I would be super happy to learn what you think about this. And if you have ideas about this and what might be the next steps. And I think we can just, we need to come up with, so what was pointed out in the first presentation, rightly so, is that there is no technical fix for social issues, right? So we need to come up with a model how trust works in research infrastructure, right? So, and we need models how we deal very smoothless with identity and identity management. And we need to have this discussion and play around with what is possible today. That's all for now. I'm happy waiting for your questions and discussions.
Lambert, thank you. I'm going to call back Irene, and the three of us will address some of your questions. Now, a few of our audience members have said that Jessica carries a tiny copy of her high school diploma in her wallet. And I know Alicia, who is a librarian who is from South America. She went to school all over the world. You know, it's hard to get these credentials sometimes. And how could the JOLOCOM wallet and the work of Conditi and others kind of give me some use cases in the academic sphere
The academic sphere. I was about to pull out the usual ones about digital ID and mobile driver licenses, which are the most researched ones at the world. But for academic conferencing, Candidi itself, of course, was, for example, about the veracity of conferences. Lambert is the expert here. I feel almost embarrassed about talking about this. But for example, DWeb is a trusted organization. And when they send out an invitation for an event or conference, I know I want to participate here because it's trusted content. But we've all heard about scam universities, about scam conferencing. So how do I know from the other side of the globe whether an online university is actually who they say they are, that they actually have quality? And this is basically where peer review comes in. And this is basically how a verified peer review portfolio about who has attended what conference, who has chaired what kind of panel, who has done a presentation on a certain topic, whose paper was chosen. So all these processes that are already in place, basically just encrypted in a different way. The information is less centralized, less hosted with one party. And also, as we try to show with the demo use case, maybe also another chance to break some of the glass ceilings by taking out the option of filtering for certain things that are unintentionally filtered for.
There are many questions in the chat about fake IDs. How do you prevent someone faking their age for underage drinking? Or how do you prevent someone from faking that they went to this university or that they presented this paper?
So basically, it always comes back to the question, or maybe Kaliya can add to this as well. So, sorry, but it always ends up with the security of the person who is in control, who is in charge of issuing those credentials, right? So and it boils down to this, and we have to get better at this, right? And this is, but this is a challenge. At any time you issue certificates of any kind, right?
Yeah, I would maybe add that it's a question of trust relationships. And so if we already know each other because we have met at the conference, then anything I will send you, or basically because of other things, you can just accept because there's a trust level established. If it's not, then a third party that both actors trust needs to be basically taken into account. For example, a university or a person you know in personal life, or something like a central authority in this case, like the state that you are actually willing to trust as well. And Kaliya has mentioned the correct word here. It's a trust framework. I sometimes like to explain it to people completely outside of the space, like we have social contracts already, how we want to live together, how we want to interact. And the trust framework is basically telling computers and devices what kind of social contract about trust we have hashed out. And so this would then also put things into perspective and the different components of the infrastructure into what are obligations, what are rights that we have when we are verifying information.
Well, what we were able to see, all of us, was Irene using real tools, the JOLOCOM web agent, to pull in a credential, to verify the credential, to share that verification, to keep that in her wallet. And if you don't remember anything else from this presentation, I hope you'll remember that this is a movement, it's an area of technology where one day there will be credentials that we all use, driver's license, passports, high school diplomas. There'll be verifiers where we can work together to make sure that these things are truly verified, whether it be by a municipality or a government, that will hold those verified credentials in our own wallet. And then when we walk into a bar, instead of handing over my driver's license that tells the bartender my age, my eye color, my weight, I can just say I am of age. This is kind of the vision of where we're going. And we can see it in academic circles because ORCID, which is a wonderful, wonderful, open, transparent source, is centralized and could go down. Its persistence might be in question on some levels. It could work. We could work with ORCID and self-sovereign identity systems to add persistence, security, redundancy, perhaps. So that's the vision for this group. I know it's very late in Germany where you're coming from, so thank you for joining us. If you like what you're seeing, this is a part of a 6-part series, and we ask you to come on back. There's 3 more sessions. We're doing them the last Thursday of every month. The next one is about decentralized social media, and the main speaker will be Jay Graber, who is the head of the Blue Sky Initiative, which is funded by Twitter to create decentralized social media. Following that, we're going to be talking about the next big thing and also winding up with the ethics and humanitarian uses of decentralized technology. Also, really want you to take a look at our resource guide, which wonderful guide put together by a librarian, Alicia Diaz. And we have tried to kind of encapsulate in words some of these thoughts, but also give you videos and links to really dig much deeper if this is intriguing to you. It's a beginning, and please share it widely. Thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you again next month. Thank you.